Hey everybody, Adam here with Hometown Acres. Welcome back. We've been getting quite a few emails lately asking us about logging. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that we had our property logged almost 1 full year ago. So I thought we'd hop on the four-wheeler, take a ride back in the woods and show you what it looks like 1 year later. Now before we head back in the woods, we've got to stop down here at the log pile and show you what all we took out of the woods so that it makes a little bit more sense. I think this will give you a little bit of perspective as we go back there. Log piles for days. And that's not even counting what we have cut and split already. You can see all the firewood. This is all stuff we've made since January. Pretty good sized pile of logs, and these are all full length too. Most of these are longer than what you put on a log truck, which will be 25 feet. A lot of this stuff is 30, 40, 50 feet because this is as it laid as they skidded it out of the woods. So that's how much material came out of the woods. And as we go up there, you're gonna be hard pressed to tell a difference, or it's not even gonna look like we were up there logging, other than a couple of piles of treetops back there. Now, before we head back, I do need to tell you that we did not do a traditional style logging. Normally, a forester would come in, paint trees, then hire a logger or put it out to the highest bidder to come in here and collect the trees that were marked for the taking. And whoever the highest bidder would be would come in, cut everything down, skid it out, and haul it out of here, and the landowner would get a big fat paycheck. That is not what we did. That's probably something we will do in the future. But what we wanted to do for right now was we had a bunch of junkier trees back in the woods. We have some really nice timber back there, but we also have some junkier trees. And we did what's called a timber stand improvement, which basically is an investment in our woods. So as you can see, all of the logs that are here, we requested that they be kept here, so we actually paid money to have this service done. Now, we could have sold all of the junk trees that we had taken out of here as scrag poles or firewood poles, but obviously that's kind of our thing. That's what we do. I wanted them left here so that we can make firewood, or there's a couple of saw logs in this pile of poles that were taken out. So, you know, that's why we kept it here, because there's value here. I estimated that we probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 cords of firewood, or maybe a little bit more, taken out of the woods. And at $400 a cord, that's, you know, in the ballpark of $30,000 worth of firewood that we had drug out here to the wood yard. So, you know, if we were to have sold it off, it wouldn't have been worth $30,000. We probably would have got, I don't know, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 as just a raw material for somebody else to turn into firewood. But if we spend the time and get through all these logs, that'll be about what it's worth. All of the junkier trees that we took out are going to open up the canopy and allow for the straighter trees that we left behind to grow faster, grow bigger, grow taller, fatter, and hopefully a higher quality. So hopefully that will turn into a higher yield at some point 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road whenever we do go to harvest off of this property. And who knows, maybe with what we've done here, we'll just leave it go and it'll be for Anderson to collect someday. I know a buddy of mine, he's got a property that when you walk over there, it is nothing but 36-inch telephone pole red oak trees. And you know that somebody 50, 100 years ago knew what they were doing for the health of the timber in the woods. And so my buddy is now going to at some point get to collect on that, because that old timer knew what he was doing and knew that he was never going to get to collect on it, but now my buddy is. So I've mentioned this quote before that I really like, and it says, "A society grows great when old men plant trees under whose shade they shall never sit." And you know, that's kind of what you got to think about when you're doing these logging jobs and doing things to your woods, because I mean, the cycle is usually larger than the average human lifespan on some of these jobs, especially if you're going to do like a clear cut and take a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of these trees take 100, 150, 200 years to grow. So like I said, hopefully we did something good for Anderson, you know, in the next 50, 60, 70 years. Anyway, with all that said, let's head back in the woods and go take a look. So the reason I wanted to do this now before everything gets greened up and you start to lose a little bit of visibility through the woods is we're gonna be able to see all of the stuff that was left behind and see how neat and tidy the woods are. Up here close to the house, I did have them chip a lot of the treetops so that, you know, as we look out the back window of the house here, you can still actually look up back in through the woods. And I mean, we see deer coming crossing through here all the time. And that was just one thing that we really wanted, was in and around the house. We didn't want to have any treetops, but you'll see there's some up here. So this small little section here was pretty much all beech, and that was one of the species that we were trying to eradicate. We wanted to leave all of the cherries and maples and hickories and, you know, all of the high dollar timber value trees back here. Beech really isn't worth much for lumber. One thing I would highly recommend to anybody that's going to get their property logged or timbered is you can draw up these contracts or make any kind of modifications you want to. Whether the logger will agree to them or not is a different story, but if they don't agree to it, then you just find yourself a different logger who will. But one thing I would make sure that you put in there, two things actually. The first one would be make sure that they are going to pile up the treetops. They don't have to get rid of them or chip them all, but they at least need to pile them up, because if they just leave the treetops where they lay, you will not be able to walk through your woods for 10, 20, 30 years, something like that, for those treetops to break down. Whereas as you can see what we had done here, all of the treetops are piled up. It's good for the wildlife, provides cover, and as you look up through here, we could still walk up through the majority of our woods and just walk around these piles. The second thing I would highly recommend you put in your contract is to make sure that it is very clearly stated that they are to come back and clean up any of those skid rows with a bulldozer or a skid steer at a minimum. Otherwise, you're going to be left with a huge rutted out mess. See, this is what I'm talking about. As you come up here, you can't really even hardly tell that we had our woods logged other than a couple of piles of treetops. We didn't take out any of the good timber. We still have a ton of nice straight trees back here. All of the good timber is left behind, and you can still walk back here through the woods, and you can see through the woods too. Now, like I said, as the greenery starts to come out, that'll dwindle a little bit, but I don't know, we enjoy our woods, we use them, we like to come back here and hang out. We go for walks and hikes back here, and it's just nice to be able to actually look through the woods. Again, you can tell they were back here. There's, you know, piles of treetops, but pile, all open in through here, all open. And there's actually still some firewood back here that we could come back and get. But you've seen how much I have sitting down there. It's like, why would I waste my time getting this stuff when I have stuff that potentially could rot on me before I get to it already skidded down to the wood yard? So I just wanted to pause the video right here to show you. This is a pretty good example of what we're after. If you look through the woods right here, nothing but straight telephone pole trees. So this is the campsite back here. This is where we always come for Memorial Day and usually Labor Day. And I did have them do a little bit more back here. I had them they had their ASV skid loader and forestry head on there. So I had them come in here and kind of grind everything up. That way we could use this as a kind of a campground, clean up the forest floor a little bit. I then came back here with a brush hog and got any of the small stuff that was left behind. And I even used the box blade to kind of come in here and drag any loose material out. Now, like I said before, the brush piles, they are good for wildlife. I've noticed a huge increase in the deer population here. Obviously, they're not bedding down in those treetop piles, but it does give them something to kind of weave and bob through as they're working their way through the woods. Just some cover. They feel like they're somewhat protected and they can kind of hide behind stuff. Like if I'm sitting here right now, there could be deer hiding on the other side of that pile over there. I don't know. But yeah, what we've done here has not scared the deer away. It wasn't like we got rid of all of their cover. So as you look up, that's where you kind of notice that we did some thinning. I mean, if you just look straight through the woods, it looks like woods, right? I mean, you can't really tell much of a difference. But when you look up, that's when you notice that there's some certain spots where some of the bigger trees were taken out that were either dead or dying, or they were not very desirable for timber, that it opens up the canopy and you see the stumps left behind. But yeah, overall, you can't really tell that the property was logged. It still looks like woods, in my opinion. If you missed those videos on the equipment that they had in here, what they used to pile up those treetops was a Takeuchi 8-ton mini excavator with a hydraulic grapple on it, you know, a rotating grapple. That way they could spin and articulate all the treetops and kind of pile them how they wanted to and set them exactly where they wanted. So if whoever you're looking at having come do your woods has one of those and that's what they're going to bring in, I highly recommend going with them, because a lot of loggers probably won't have that. But again, keep your eye open and look for somebody who can do something like this, because I mean, unless you don't really find value and joy in being back in your woods and it's just an investment for you and you just want to harvest timber every 15, 20 years, then don't worry about it. But for us, we're back here all the time, and I wanted to be able to come back here and walk through these woods if I wanted to. This section of woods here, there really wasn't a lot of great timber. And so, you know, when we were trying to decide what trees to take, we kind of just said, all right, we don't want to completely clear cut this, because then you're just going to get, you know, a whole bunch of invasive species growing up on the forest floor. So we basically left enough trees in here to hopefully repopulate the same species that we were after. So we left a lot of maples and cherries in this section because that's what was here. There's a couple of hickories, but yeah, again, any of the really junk trees we took out to allow some of these smaller straight trees to grow. A lot of the trees in this area are anywhere from 8 to 14 inches, kind of some smaller stuff. But as you can tell, a lot of the ones that we left are pretty straight. Looks like telephone poles. They just need some time to get bigger. This section up here behind the house is probably one of my favorites. As you look down through the trees, you can see the pond down there. And again, just nothing but telephone pole trees. And a lot of this section here is red oak. So I guess the reason for making this video is the number of emails we've gotten over the last couple of months talking about their horror stories with loggers, as well as I know two people personally who have their own horror stories. One is my next door neighbor. We've actually shown his property in the past, and Doug's brother has a horror story of his own with a logger. And you know, basically it just comes down to the logger not doing what they say they're gonna do. You know, hauling trees out and not paying the landowner, that's a big one, right? You know, you just kind of assume that your property might get screwed up, but at the very least you're gonna get paid. Well, Doug's brother didn't even get paid. And we may do a video on that here coming up and give out that guy's name. We'll have to talk to Doug and his brother, see if they wanna do that. But I couldn't believe it. They screwed up his property to the point he can't even get back in the woods anymore, took out the logs, and then skipped town. Didn't even pay him for the logs. But yeah, and then, you know, you got loggers that they'll have in the contract that they're going to come back and fix up your skid roads and with a bulldozer or a skid loader, and then they never do. You've got to have some kind of collateral to get those guys to come back, some kind of reason. One email we got, the guy said that his forester, he was smart enough to get a forester that held 10% of the value of the logs that were taken out in like an escrow account or a security deposit account until the logger came back to clean up the woods. And I think he said the total amount of logs was $25,000. So the amount held in the security deposit account was $2,500. Meanwhile, the amount of damage that needed cleaned up was probably $10,000 to $15,000 worth of damage. And so the logger's like, well, I could either come back and spend $10,000 to $15,000 cleaning the woods back up to get my $2,500, or I could just forfeit the security deposit. And so he forfeited the security deposit. So that's what you're up against. You got to have some way to have some leverage on these guys to get them to come back and finish the job. You know, put in the contract that they cannot haul the logs off of the property. They can drag them down to a skid yard or something like that, but they cannot actually truck the logs out until they've come in and cleaned up the woods behind them. I'm not a logger. I don't know if that's something that can be done, but you've got to have some kind of collateral as a landowner. You need to get references. You've got to talk to, you've got to see other properties that these loggers have done. You've got to talk to the landowners, and are they happy with the service that was performed? Do background checks. You know, you got to do your research and do your homework and make sure you know who you're dealing with. Now, every time we do a video talking about the horror stories with logging and talking about preventative measures or things to be wary of, inevitably over the next month or two, I'll get a bunch of comments and emails from actual loggers and foresters telling me that I'm just giving the industry a bad name. And that's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm just trying to make landowners aware of the risks and challenges they're up against if they're interested in getting their property logged. And you know, you got to think about it. I know that not every logger is bad. There's a lot of good loggers out there. But the scale to which the bad loggers are screwing people is just so much greater than anything else out there. You know, it's not like you got on Facebook Marketplace to go buy a chainsaw and you get home, and the second you get it home, it doesn't run and you're out $300, $400, $500, right? You know, that's not quite as big of a deal as getting screwed to the tune of $5,000 to $100,000 on a logging contract back in your woods. So the scale at which people are subjecting themselves to risk with these bad loggers is just so much greater. So, you know, for every 1 out of 100 stories that you hear that's a bad one, you just got to figure that landowner cannot be happy, and they're probably telling everybody they know. And so that's why they just make a lot more noise when you start talking high dollars, because people get really mad really quick. So I'm not trying to give the industry a bad name, just trying to make people aware of what they're up against. And again, do your homework. Make sure you know who you're dealing with. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. We are very happy. We're very fortunate that we're happy with our woods after having gone through what we've gone through. I hope that's helpful to hopefully give you a target of what you should be looking for if you want to get your woods logged. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give me a big thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.